Go.
Hello and welcome to the Secrets at the BBFC podcast, episode 2. Obviously, this episode has been a very long time coming, simply because I haven't really had the time to do it. But let's just gloss over that. So, I think I said in the last episode I was going to do an episode on junior categories next or something, but I've decided, let's just do something different. So this time, we're going to be talking about the differences between the BBFC, which rates films in the UK, and the MPAA, which, of course, rates films over in the US. I probably should call it the MPAA now, because it changed its name last year, I think. But anyway, so today I have not one guest, but I have two guests. So on my right, I have Mark, who is also known as Skinny E Media, and on the other side, I have Rob. So, hello to both of you.
Hello, how do you do?
Hi,
Not too bad. Yeah, very good to have you here. So, if that's that's the introductions done. So let's get cracking. So I thought I might start the podcast by talking about their innate difference in attitude that they have. So it seems that stateside they seem to be somewhat more liberal than the BBFC here, but there are probably several aspects that we'll talk about later in which the BBFC are definitely the more liberal organisation. So I suppose it's first worth talking about the fact that in the US, obviously you have the unrated feature, which means that basically you can stock anything in markets or online stores, and chances are it probably won't get taken off. So has that been your experience with the MPAA so far, Mark?
Yes, because I've actually been in the United States for some time. I'm actually a dual citizen, so I'm quite familiar with both systems. They often use the unrated category as a sort of loophole, because if you get an X or NC-17, cinemas and mainstream distributors like Blockbuster, which no longer exists, or Walmart, will not stock it, for fear that it might upset parents or it's pornographic. But I think this is more of a monetary issue more than anything. What sells the most tickets and DVD rental streaming are the Rs, the PG-13s, the PGs. So the unrated thing is more or less just another way to slip in stuff that probably would be flagged if it was NC-17, but they can put it in as unrated and no one will cry any tears. But I think it's a bit dishonest, because it kind of can imply that, it's fine for children, really, or teenagers, but there might be some stuff in there that is just really horrific. Let's not forget, Human Centipede 2 and Serbian film, in its uncut forms, are actually legal to buy in the United States. And I think in Canada as well. Well, they're banned.
Indeed, they are.
Heavily cut in its censored forms in the United Kingdom and Ireland.
It's because in America they are protected by their First Amendment. So basically, they can't pass legislation that forbids you to sell unrated films like is the case over here.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
That would be illegal.
Yeah, and we all know how notoriously difficult the US Constitution is to amend. I think you need a 2/3 supermajority. But I think I'm probably rambling a bit. So I guess one of the things with the BBFC and the MPAA, one of the things they share in common is their innate ability to respond in a bit of a knee-jerk manner to certain disasters. So obviously you've got, in the UK, you had the Hungerford massacre, in which a man opened fire on the town of Hungerford in Berkshire, I believe it is, and obviously after then, James Furman, who was then the director of the BBFC, obviously went on a bit of a moral crusade, you could say it was, in order to tone down several films. So obviously you had films like Rambo 3. Now that was a very, very heavily cut film for its video release, and even at 18. Even at 18, it was pretty much hacked to bits. There was basically nothing left in it that could be considered at all objectionable, and the argument was even put forward at the time that the video release should actually be rated 15. So what were your thoughts on that?
Well, my personal thoughts are, it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, every time something like that happens, like there's a shooting like Hungerford or Dunblane or Columbine in America or countless others, they always try to blame something like movies or video games or music and everything. And it's ridiculous now as it is back then. There has never been any evidence to find any link between, violence in media and violence in real life, but it's just a great scapegoat. And of course, you got people like Furman or Jack Palance at the MPAA who just want to swallow that bait, hook, sinker, and then they just start shredding the films and hope that they're making a difference, and they're fucking not. I mean, it's ridiculous.
I love how you just went into a small rant there, but and actually one of the you pointed out a very good another similarity between the BBFC and the MPAA is that for a very long time both of them had similarly autocratic, somewhat obsessive people in charge of their organisations. So obviously James Furman at the BBFC and Jack Valenti at the MPAA, who was actually
Valenti, that's it.
I believe he was I think he was Lyndon B. Johnson's secretary or something like that. So he worked in the government. So obviously a very knowledgeable person, but then
he had strong connections with the federal system, and who took over for him after his reign, I think, was Dan Glickman, and I know Joan Graves was another name at Motion Picture Association that was very much responsible for certain decisions on particular films. Let me just tell you something that's hilarious that I saw in an interview one time. One of the films that she regrets giving out a rating to that was by accident was Cars 2, which got a G rating. But because they complained of a torture scene involving a car having its tyres being held and wheeling on till it explodes. Of all films, that one?
I mean, Cars 2. I mean, come on, surely they've got bigger fish to fry than that.
Well, it's like what James Furman said. His only regret was giving a PG rating to Prince of Thieves. And it's like, of his 25-year tenure, that's his only regret? I mean, the guy gave an uncut U rating to Watership Down. I mean,
and let's not forget, he also, gave a lot of PG ratings to films that probably shouldn't, like Jaws, Arachnophobia, Empire of the Sun, and whatnot.
Jurassic Park, The Mask, Mission Impossible. Films that nowadays would be rated 12A, but back then, because 12 was restricted, they had to just be so much more easygoing at PG. They're probably concerned they would get more complaints if they rated it 12 than at PG, so they just hedged their bets.
Well, that's what happened with the whole Spider-Man debacle. There was an uproar about parents not being able to take their children to go see Spider-Man. Tobey Maguire one, not the one with Tom Holland. I don't really care for those. And that's what spearheaded, to some extent, as well, with trial sessions in Norwich, the 12A, which had its 20th anniversary. And I actually interviewed Sarah Peacock from BBFC about this. I'm saying its impact and how it became, slowly through time, quite like PG, a family rating. I never viewed it as a family rating. If an animated film was a 12, I viewed it as adult. Just like Belleville Rendezvous. So I'm getting off on a tangent.
And let's not forget their decision to pass Poltergeist at a PG rating, despite that pretty graphic face-tearing scene.
You mean the MPAA or the MPAA?
Yeah.
It's 15 over here.
I mean,
not what I've seen Poltergeist, but
I think it's probably safe to assume that Poltergeist would likely retain its 15 rating over here purely for the threat, I guess, and also that particular scene that I just mentioned. So,
well, the horror threat content's relentless on Poltergeist, and unlike Gremlins, which has a sense of humour about it, it's kind of childish for a 15 anyways. Now it's a 12. Poltergeist is quite dark and unrelenting. I just don't see that being a 12. That would cause complaints, just like 10 Cloverfield Lane and Woman in Black caused complaints.
Well, not after Woman in Black, anyway. If you remember, the BBFC got inundated with complaints after that because parents took their little kids to go see it because it contained Daniel Radcliffe. And then, of course, they all shat their pants in terror. And then, of course, they just sent the complaints to the BBFC, who said, right, that's it, no more 12A rated horror films.
I think that's probably for the best.
I mean, it is sort of funny that quite a few of those complaints do seem to come from parents who took 4-year-old children to watch something like The Dark Knight. I mean, you have to remember that even though The Dark Knight was the most complained about film of 2008, the vast majority of those complaints came from parents who had taken children who were nowhere near the age appropriate to watch that film, given how given the intensity of certain sequences. I mean, obviously, that doesn't mean it is a 15 film. I haven't seen it, but it does look just about okay at 12.
It is very borderline. I saw it at the cinema, and we first saw the pencil scene. Me and my friend was going, ow! You don't see any blood or anything, but it is very scary. It is quite impactful. I mean, your mileage may vary on what you think. I personally think it's okay at 12A, bearing in mind you have to cut the umbilical cord at some point.
Yeah.
Hold on, let me interject on this one. A film that really should not have been a 12A for me was Da Vinci Code or Casino Royale. That scene where Paul Bettany tortures himself and he's naked. We don't see any penis or genitalia, but just the flagellation and self-harm and some of the blood is a bit too disturbing. I saw this when I was 13 or something. I felt uncomfortable doing that scene. And then Casino Royale, the torture scene, they should have just cut that whole thing out for a 12. That was inappropriate.
And actually, this is actually quite an interesting case study here, Casino Royale, because the two films were actually cut differently by the BBFC and the MPAA. So, whilst the BBFC merely took issue with the torture scene, which is the infamous scene where Le Chiffre tortures James Bond for I think it's bank information or something like that. So that was the scene cut in the UK, but in the US they actually took issue with two further scenes. One was the bathroom fight near the beginning of the film, and the other was the stairwell fight, I believe.
Yeah, when they attack with machete.
Yeah. So it's quite interesting to see the whilst both of them were focused on the violence, they were focused on very different violence sequences, because obviously the BBFC is much more concerned about things like torture than it is about general fight scenes. That's been a pretty clear concern from them for quite a while, it would seem.
I remember seeing that same report you were saying. I think it was on censorship.com, and I found it quite bizarre too, because usually MPAA is a little bit more fidgety about sexual content and nudity, and that torture scene in question definitely has some sort of weird sexualized element to the violence. And I was quite surprised, because I even have seen it on Uncut, like on HBO or something, when I was in the US visiting a family member, and I thought, Christ almighty, this can't be PG-13. This is like a R at best. I don't know, maybe I was a prude or something, but I don't think you should be showing torture scenes involving a man being beaten in the genitals at that low of a category. Even at 15 it raises silly questions, but because it's James Bond, they let it pass. License to Kill, I know everyone says that one's the most violent one, but at least License to Kill didn't have a scene where a man's bollocks get beaten, but we do see heads exploding and a man being eviscerated by a saw machine in his leg.
That was
unsettling.
Grim.
I think in terms of that, it is equally fair to say that License to Kill does not deserve to be a 12A for the reasons just given. So,
and then Quantum of Solace, I think, even had a brief moment of rape. And Spectre had that scene where my eyes man's gouged out, and then he has like a needle pricked into his head, and he's like, ah! Oh.
I mean, seriously.
If this wasn't Bond, this would be 15.
Yeah, no, I was when I was watching that scene, I was thinking to myself, I was amazed they didn't cut more of it out to achieve a 12. It was still pretty brutal, even for 12. I mean, I can see why something like that would probably have to be reduced anyway, but things are weird.
You mentioned The Dark Knight earlier. I mean, have you seen The Dark Knight Rises?
Yeah.
I have not.
Because I remember seeing that, and I thought, bloody hell, this is violent for a 12A. I mean, like I say, you don't see any detail, much like the previous one, but you get necks get broken, I mean, throats get crushed by kneecaps, I mean, and it just seems quite nonchalant about it. It's like, we're just quite surprised that, but, I mean, obviously the MPAA, we understand they'll let so much go in terms of violence at certain categories, but it comes quite surprising that BBFC actually do say, yeah, no, we'll let this go. But then again, of course, there's also Alita Battle Angel, which is the most violent 12A or PG-13 I have ever seen. And no cuts on either side of the Atlantic there. I mean, I guess just thought, oh, it's a silly, cheesy sci-fi flick that's heavy CGI. We just let stuff go.
Yeah, one similarity between the two is they really do seem to let things go, and I point out Terminator 3 here because Terminator 3 was granted an R rating in the US. I think it was for both its language and violence, because obviously the MPAA states that you can only say fuck once. Obviously,
even though that's demonstrably untrue, you can actually say it twice. There have been so many PG-13s with two.
Yeah.
The Martian and Social Network are a few good examples of that word being used more than once. Or American President, which uses three.
Knives Out.
Tres palabras.
Really? Yes. I don't think I'd ever come across that one.
It's a political drama with Michael Douglas.
I thought you said Nights Out. I didn't realise you meant Knives Out. Yeah.
No, I said American President. Wait, who said Knives Out? Was it Rob?
Oh, I did, yes, because that contains two fucks in, and of course it was passed on and cut at PG-13, much like Social Network and Deep Impact did back in 97 or 98, I can't remember which year. So they had no issue. So clearly you can say fuck twice in a PG-13.
Yeah, and you can even say it 3 times, I believe. I think As Good As It Gets with Jack Nicholson had 3 uses, as did, I think, The American President also had 3 uses. Both of them were PG-13s. But anyway, back to Terminator 3. Gone?
There was a film just recently that actually said 4. It was an animated documentary from Denmark about refugee crisis called Flee, or Floch, and that had 4, but they only put 2 uses in the subtitle version. Because I saw it as part of a film festival, I was quite, wow, the MPAA's grown up. And they gave it a 15 by the BBFC, weirdly enough, which I think would really hurt the audience for this, because I think a lot of young people would like it because it's animated, but it's also about, politics and stuff. But anyways...
Oh, no, actually, I just wanted to point out, you haven't seen The Lady in the Van, have you?
I have. I've seen it. My mother likes it.
Yeah, instantly, I was just looking it up, and it seems that it's rated PG-13 for a brief, unsettling image.
There is a scene in question which involves a car collision, and then there's blood stain on the windshield, and it's implied that she accidentally killed someone. But I think at the BBFC they sort of overlooked that, and they focused on the F words in question. But yet the MPAA didn't list anything about the uses of that word.
No, they didn't. And when I was watching it at first, I was thinking, well, I counted about 4 uses of strong language in the first half an hour of the film. I was thinking I was surprised they got away with that many uses in such a short period of time. It was quite something, but.
They've moved on since the King's Speech.
Oh yeah, definitely. There was even a film I think like Diana Spencer came out just last year that had about 6 or so words that rhyme with muck. I'm trying not to use strong language on this one, just in case if Sarah Peacock or David Alston are watching, they want me to be clean cut. But
really? I don't tend to be.
Oh, of course, yeah. And just in case you aren't aware, for those of you who are listening, The King's Speech is, it is a very good film, of course. It contains 2 sequences where the speech therapist gets the king to swear as part of overcoming his stammer. And, of course, there are quite a few uses of the word muck. Now, it was originally awarded a 15 here in the UK, and it was awarded an R rating in the US. But the difference between the two is that the BBFC actually had the censor downgrade it to 12A because they recognised the speech therapy context. The MPAA, on the other hand, didn't. So it seems like the BBFC actually has more of an eye for context, I would say.
They certainly come a long way in that regards, because there was a time where one use only at 12, any more you get a 15, and they even mentioned this on a podcast one time, saying that Notting Hill, a movie with Hugh Grant and Julia Roberts, would probably be a 12 had it come out now, because it had 2 uses of that word, and they gave it a 15 back in 99. Because it was more than what they accepted. But yeah, I'm very appreciable about the board using more context-based approaches with words that rhyme with muck or runt. Now, one thing I will say about that other word that rhymes with runt, anyone seen Dom Hemingway? That was just foul. He was not only talking about getting fellatio, but he was using that word like 9 or 10 times. That's way more than what I'm usually allowing at 15.
Yeah, and I had that issue as well with the favourite. I think that contained 6 uses of very strong language, and some of them were. I mean, none of them were particularly aggressive, but I was sort of surprised that some of them, that one use in particular was somewhat aggressively directed at a woman. I was quite surprised at how that was a 15, considering that they had already cut movies like I think it's called Angel's Eyes for
Angel's Share. Do you mean?
No, not the.
No, it is. I saw it just the other day. Great Scottish film by Ken Loach. It has like 13 or 14 uses of runt.
I think I was. I think I was talking about. I think it was. It was a film called Angels. Yeah, Angel Eyes. It's a film with Jennifer Lopez, and I think it was cut by the BBFC because of its single, somewhat aggressive use of very strong language, and it would appear that nowadays something like that wouldn't really be cut by the BBFC.
Same with Bridget Jones's Diary. there's just one use of the word cunt mentioned by the boss is, "Wait, careful, you ham-fisted cunt," and that was changed to ham-fisted cow to avoid an 18. Obviously, nowadays, I don't think that would really be much of a bother to them. It would get an uncut 15, especially because in the context when it's done in a very comedic manner, because it's a comedy film. That Angel Eyes, however, that's a bit more serious, but I still think they would allow it at a 15. I mean, according to the GNC films, the cutting edge that on YouTube that we watch, that Angel Share, well, officially it was cut down from 20 to 6 uses of, well, that word, although apparently it's actually 8, they just missed 2 of them.
Yeah, it shows how the BBFC can still miss stuff, like the MPAA. So,
They did that. They did it with a Twister back in 1996. There was one use of the word "fuck" in there. They missed it, so they passed it at PG. They re-examined it for a video. They caught it, so said, "Okay, you're either going to be 12 or that's getting cut out." The distributors chose the latter.
Indeed, they did. And,
I didn't even know about that.
I think,
That's
apparently
bizarre.
so. If in doubt, always look it up on IMDb. That's an incredibly great source of information and knowledge, that website.
I always check their parents'
indeed.
guides all the time.
Yeah, same here, absolutely. So I guess we should sort of talk about how ratings have sort of changed over time. So
Did you not want to talk about Terminator 3, which you were mentioning earlier?
Oh, yeah, I did. So obviously Terminator 3 was passed with a 12 rating in the UK, but contains quite a brutal scene in which a robot basically rams its robotic arm through a man's chest. It's quite graphic, and I think that would...
And well lit, so I mean...
Oh, yeah. It's not a discrete scene in any way, shape or form. So I think something like that would probably be passed at a 15 today. But it's interesting to see how the BBFC... Yeah. But it's interesting to see how lenient the BBFC were compared to the MPAA in that regard. And I suppose we should sort of talk about how the PG-13 rating in the US and the PG rating in the UK have sort of changed, because obviously the PG-13 rating is nowhere near as lenient as it used to be. Obviously not until the I think it was the Super Bowl incident of 2004. I'm not particularly aware of it, but anyhow, I think I was watching a video called it was something like WTF happened to PG-13, and it showed a comparison between the 1997 film Anaconda, which features some quite graphic scenes of stabbings and shootings and the lot, and then its sequel, Anaconda Blood Orchid or something like that, in 2004, which occurred after the Super Bowl incident, is nowhere near as graphic as the original film.
First was 15 over here, the latter was the equivalent 12A. So, I mean, that probably would tell you quite a lot. But however, I mean, while you're talking about how lenient the PG-13 was back then, we seem to be forgetting that a lot of the PG-13 ratings in the 90s did get rated PG over here, mainly because 12 was restricted. So, as I mentioned earlier, the BBFC had to be a lot more accommodating.
As well, there were also a lot of them that got 15s as well, like Changing Places, Dreamscape, Flamingo Kid, Red Dawn, which is the first ever film to receive the PG-13, and I think Doc Hollywood as well.
Mortal Kombat.
And some of those films, early PG-13 films were quite adult. They had quite a bit more nudity than, the PG-13 films nowadays. I think probably because of, like you said, cultural conservatism, because Janet Jackson exposed her breast for a brief flash, and then 9/11, so on and so forth, and the fear of losing out on the Chinese film market, because they're very censorious, is why they have to desexify a lot of the films that are aimed at teenagers. I doubt a film like, even for a second, Titanic or Mr. Woodcock might even be PG-13 by today's standards, because so many people are freaked out by just a brief flash of the areola.
Yeah. I mean, and it's and that's also one of the clear differences is the MPAA's seemingly never-ending obsession with sex and nudity and that kind of thing. I think it was Pedro Almodovar's Bad Education, or La Mala Educación, as it's known as in Spain. I think that was 15 rated over here, but NC-17 rated, oddly, over in the US due to its sex scene. So obviously they are much more preoccupied about sex over there than
you're absolutely
than
right. Here. And not to interrupt you, but we know about Nomadland, right? That was a major film, won Best Picture. The only reason why that film received an R rating was because it shown Frances McDormand bathing in hot waters. You see everything, but it's very quick, and there's no sort of leery sexualization you would find in a typical PG-13 or R film. It just felt really restricted. I didn't understand why. There was nothing offensive about Nomadland.
Well, one thing with two films I've always looked at to see the difference between the BBFC and the MPAA are the first Hunger Games film, and that Fighting with My Family that stars Florence Pugh.
Yeah. I haven't seen Fighting with My Family, but I've seen Hunger Games.
Well, I mean, as you may know, the Hunger Games was an uncut PG-13 in America. But the BBFC...
It wasn't, actually. It was. It had to be cut to avoid an R rating first, and then that PG-13 version became the worldwide version of the film. But yeah, it is still PG-13 in that form.
But I'm not... Okay, well, was it that PG-13 version of the film that the BBFC decided had to be cut to get it down to a 12A? Because they did say that film had to be subject to quite some heavy cuts and edits in order to get it down to the equivalent 12A rating. Most of it involved darkening or just digitally moving blood, which, to be asked me, is kind of silly because you should keep it in the violence but removing the consequences of said violence. Yeah. But of course it would have been an uncut, uncut in inverted commas by what you said, 15. But again, that's all due to violent content. Whereas Fighting with My Family, on the other hand, over here was an uncut 12A, which probably not as much swearing as you can get into a 12A, but still, it was uncut. The MPAA gave it heavy cuts, or just heavy cuts, for it to get the PG-13 rating. Otherwise, it would have been R.
Yeah, I don't understand. Sorry, you were saying?
Oh, no, continue.
Yeah, because I actually saw the same thing as you did on censorship.com. I think it was because of the use of the word cock, which...
There was that one, yes.
Why?
Lena Headey's line. Well, it is considered quite a strong word. I mean, the three strongest words are, and I'm going to have to say them, I'm afraid, cunt, fuck, and cock. Obviously, cunt being the strongest.
You can't say the C word in a 12.
Was this Fighting with My Family?
Well, yeah, the word cock is mentioned in Fighting with My Family, and of course, Lena Headey says it's like you should see his cock when talking to other couple. The MPAA decided the word cock had to be cut off, or just cut halfway through, in order for it to be allowed at PG-13. There's also a scene where...
sexual sense, like penis, it's like using the word twat in its actual meaning. That would be considered more offensive than just calling someone a twat because he's your mate. Okay.
But also, I mean, there's always the scene where Florence Pugh as Paige first sees The Rock, and she goes, "Dick me dead and bury me pregnant," and then The Rock turns around and repeats the phrase back to her. But of course, the PG-13 rated version, his version of saying it, his line is cut out, so the line is only said once. So these are just kind of things that had to be removed stateside in order to get the equivalent rating for theatrical release. So with that in mind, we can see what the difference is in priorities for both the two firms.
That's weird.
Yeah, Yeah, I don't quite understand that one because I've seen other 12A and PG-13 titles that get away with a lot more sexual profanity than that. One comes to mind is like Austin Powers movies, which had a lot of sort of double entendres about, well, pardon my French, cock, willy, fuck you, fuck me. Yeah, it's pretty overt. I'm sure, because I'm British myself. When I use that word, I don't really use it in a sort of, oh, you're acting like a cock. I only use it for like, it was a cock up, which is a milder way of saying it was an F up, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a more of a UK versus US divide here. That even goes direct to the use of the C word or the word fanny. It means completely different things, and it's certainly a more sexualized, the word fanny, back in Blighty, and the C word is more misogynistic in Estados Unidos, or États-Unis.
That is correct. That's correct.
Indeed.
One thing that the MPAA is actually renowned for, because probably the reason why they were treated Fight My Family they did was because it was a foreign independent film, which, as they're renowned for, they just come down heavier on, whereas they give more passes to the big American studio, big Hollywood studios.
Well, that doesn't make any sense because Fighting With My Family is a UK-US co-production, but it wasn't through Disney or Paramount, it was through Metro Goldwyn Mayer and United Artists. So I understand, but yeah, that's a bit...
That's just a theory I had anyway.
I bet they wouldn't have done this if this was Marvel. I mean, I could go on about Marvel, but I know some people really freaked out about Eternals, particularly in the Middle East and even in the US, where they freaked out about the sex scene and the LGBT characters. Like, come on, people, give me a break.
Yeah, and in Russia as well. I mean, if there's any mention of homosexuality in any films, they just come down like a ton of bricks. And I remember that 2017 Power Rangers film, because one of the characters was LGBT, they gave the thing a damn 18 rating over there. And it's like, I mean, I don't really have to go into just how ridiculous it is to give a film like that an 18 rating.
Yeah, I mean, and also I think it's probably good that we don't have that the MPAA and BBFC don't suffer from those kind of issues, because I think it was the ninth Star Wars film had to be cut because two female characters were kissing or something like that. It was. I mean, it was literally just a brief kiss. It wasn't anything like very extensive or anything. But in Singapore, they had to cut it. I mean, it's the most innocuous thing on the planet, and you still choose to cut something like that. So, yeah, that's it. If you suffer the BBFC and the MPAA, at least you don't have to suffer that. So I guess that's one of the similarities.
Let me interject here, because MPAA has been getting accusations about homophobia and alleged transphobia about some of their decisions regarding same-sex content, like Boys Don't Cry.
Oh yeah, they have.
Ginger and Rosa, or something like that. I think it was Boys Don't Cry and But I'm a Cheerleader. I mentioned on This Film's Not Yet Rated, an 18 certificate documentary, one of the greatest ever made, and they were flagging that, seeing that if it was straight people, it wouldn't have this problem. But because it's same sex, no, you're gonna get NC-17 unless you trim that down. They even flagged interracial sex on Storytelling by Todd Solondz. But yeah, some bizarre...
It's just weird.
America, I've been in the US for some time. I'm more British than anything, as you could tell from my accent, but we've got some strange views about certain issues that we would need a separate podcast on this matter regarding political and social differences, which I don't think we can accommodate for this time, but yes.
Well, don't think, no,
Britain's a little bit more relaxed about that sort of thing, but but at the same time, we do look more puritanical than our European brothers. Many of our French and German counterparts would look at us thinking, well, you're a bunch of prudes, aren't you?
Well, we're the only country in Europe that gives that much of a toss about swearing. And the Irish do a bit, but like you can see films over here that begin 15s and potentially 18s or anything, or RNC-17 for their bad language. But in continental Europe, they'll probably just get passed through 12 ratings because, well, they just don't give a shit about that. I mean, Sausage Party was given an 11 rating, I think, in Sweden.
Yeah, well, they're a bit more relaxed about adult cartoons. They really don't care. I think even like Paprika, which is Japanese animation, or Demon Slayer, that got like an 11. And in France, it got like a PG type of warning, which they dub as tout public avec avertissement, which means all ages welcome, but with a caution. So yeah.
Well, lovely.
Well, in France, they both 50 Shades of Grey and that Blue is the Warmest Colour, both were rated 12. So, I mean, I think that really just says it all at the end of the day.
Yeah, we do seem quite puritanical, but who in their minds would take a 12-year-old to see 50 Shades of Grey? I don't quite get that. Or
that's an odd one.
Well, I'm not saying you should take a 12-year-old to go see it. I mean, I think a lot of it does come down to a bit of parental responsibility, and I think a lot of these age ratings are just there because a lot of parents can't be bothered to engage in responsibility and just rather just have someone make the decision for them.
Yeah. We're not saying you should do it. We're just saying you can do it. It's just that kind of. Just sort of boils down to that, I guess. So,
although the R rating in America allows them to take their kids to see us anyway. In fact, loads of parents did take their kids to go see Deadpool or Sausage Party in America.
Yeah, and
much of a surprise.
I was actually there when they played those two films. I was somewhere near San Diego, and I did see quite a lot of children present, particularly at Deadpool. And I think there was one or two of them that was also another film called Happy Time Murders that involved puppets. And that caused quite a lot of complaints because it appeared that it was family friendly, but it wasn't. Ted had that same problem. Now, I haven't seen Deadpool Sausage Party in UK cinemas at that time, but what about for you? What was it like?
I saw it. I mean, I didn't go to see the first Ted at the cinema. I saw Ted 2, but of course they're all 15 rated, and of course a 15 is restricted, so parents can't take their kids to it. In fact, one of my friends who was working in one of the local cinemas hit a deal with some complaining parents that they couldn't take their kids to go see Deadpool. It was like, well, I'm sorry, but the law's the law. We can't let you go see them.
Yeah, I'm sure that was a very difficult time. South Park, when that film came out, had the same problem. I wanted to see it. I told my dad, but he wouldn't let me go to see it. Same with Team America. And I was a bit upset, but I understood why.
I was 14 when South Park came out, so I managed to pass myself off. So that was my first ever 15-rated film at the cinema. I was very chuffed. It was hysterics.
Did you put like a little beard, or did you put like some stubble or a beard trying to get in?
No, I was just an early developer, to be honest. And my mum bought me the fucking tickets because I was a bit too embarrassed to go up and actually ask for fear they'd ask me.
Yeah. Actually, I think I was listening to a BBFC podcast. I think it was with Mark Commode, where he was pointing out that David Lynch's film Wild of Heart, I think it contains a scene where a man's head is blown off or something like that. They had to alter it so that 9-year-olds could see it. It's not a kid's film. It's an 18 rating over in the UK. So why would you arbitrarily alter something in order for 9-year-olds to see it with their parents? I mean,
do you mean the Wild at Heart of Nicolas Cage and Laura Dern?
Probably.
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah. The head blowing off scene, I read that, was altered to avoid an NC-17. Because obviously, and that's just one thing weird about the culture of it. It's not a fault of the MPAA, really, but it's a fault of the culture. Of course, as we know, and Skinny mentioned it earlier, they won't show NC-17 rated films at the cinema. But of course, that's obviously why they altered it, just so they could go see it. I mean, just so they would show it, not necessarily so kids could go see it, because that's not the kind of thing you should take your kids to go see. There's enough sex and nudity in there to make it completely inappropriate.
Yeah, anyone who's
it is
taken
just weird.
their like 8 or 10-year-old son to go see that, or Pulp Fiction or Fight Club, they probably should be thinking twice about that. I didn't see Pulp Fiction until I was 19, and there's one particular scene which involves implied rape, and there's a lot of racist language and sexual threat going on in that particular. I've kind of had a nightmare
And drug
a
abuse.
day after. I was going in it because I liked Uma Thurman. I thought she was very attractive in that one, until things started to spiral with the drug overdose, and I thought, oh, this is not quite the film I was expecting it to be. I thought it was going to be a bit more kinkier, but guess not.
No, well, I suppose that's the sort of the thing of the time. So, I think we've basically covered everything we wanted to cover. My headphones are at present dying. Well, one of them's died already, so I think we might wrap it up there. So next episode,
having good fun.
Yeah, that was good fun. Thank you for joining me. And next time we will be discussing. I think we'll do present BBFC issues like self-harm and suicide, that kind of thing. So thank you very much for listening.
Hey, you're very welcome. More than happy to be on board.
Yeah, anytime you want, just ask. I'll come back.
Thank you very much.
All right, then take care, everyone. Get vaccinated.
Oh yeah, please do.
Absolutely. And goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.